Welcome, this is Hamster Glitch on a Shield here with Dark Souls PvP, a retrospective. My friend got some glitch on his shield. It looked really cool. He couldn't see it, but he saw the blue light coming off of it. Has nothing to do with the video, but I figured I would show that. Anyway, it's been a long time, right? Well, I'm here again with another long video, but this time we're gonna take a look at Dark Souls PvP and how it has evolved over time. I did mention I wanted to do this, so here it is. But let's just get right into it. Let's start with the obvious, most controversial mechanic ever, I think, in my opinion. Poise. Poise mechanic was needed since Demon Souls. In Demon Souls, you only got hyper armor from certain big weapons, and that was it. Everything else would stagger you, and that's pretty much how they reverted back to in Dark Souls 3, and a little bit for Dark Souls 2. So, the poise mechanic was implemented so that armor actually did something in terms of defense and, protecting you against stun locks. In Dark Souls 1, your armor, as you upgrade it, you will see that the damage that you take is reduced in both PvE and also PvP, which kind of never happened after Dark Souls 1. Armor sort of became useless when it came to PvP. In my opinion, at least. It is true for Dark Souls 3. Armor does nothing. It has been proven with numbers and raw data. So I'm not just talking out of my ass for that one. A lot of the things are, and they can be forgiven when it comes to Dark Souls 1, because all they needed to do was slightly improve on Demon Souls. And basically what they did is they improved a couple of mechanics and they made the gameplay slower. Demon Souls was a little bit more speedy, like Dark Souls 3, which is why it sort of impresses me that people often forget that, Dark Souls 3 is faster, but that they basically just reverted back to the way things were in Demon Souls. Everything was slightly speedier. So they had a chance to remove the backstabs from Demon Souls and changing to Dark Souls. Because, it's a separate series. They don't have a relationship with each other in terms of story, lore, and all that. Weapons, certainly, yes, but not with all the other stuff. They had a chance to remove backstabs, and they didn't. I think that was a massive fuck-up. Backstabs are not a PvP exclusive issue. It trivializes PvE as well. So every humanoid enemy that you come across, you can parry and you can backstab and whatever, and it just makes them non-threatening at all. Same thing, don't get me wrong, same thing happens in Bloodborne as well. So I am biased towards Bloodborne, but Bloodborne has the exact same problem. Except that instead of backstabs, it's with parries. So basically, you have to choose not to use backstabs if you want to basically give yourself a challenge effectively. Because it's always the best thing to do at all times. You may not say, well, not all the time, but if you do nail it, you're going to have a massive advantage. So it's always a good thing to go for, and some people literally only play PvP. They only play it with backstabs. And you see here a massive stun lock. This is why they implemented poise. And this is why they've been reworking it ever since Dark Souls 1. Another thing, the weapon infusion system is improved in this game when compared to Demon Souls. But it's not quite as linear as I believe it should have been. But it was a step in the right direction. I think Dark Souls 3 got it just right, and Bloodborne too. Actually, all of them got it right after Dark Souls 1, because it's very... They picked arbitrary numbers, like why is it specifically to plus 15? Why do you need to upgrade it to plus 5 to change it to some other element, and then the element has a different number of upgrades that you need to do if you want to change it to something else, and it's just really weird and convoluted. But it was a step in the right direction. It's a little bit more open to the player as opposed to Demon Souls, where you had two blacksmiths and they each did something different, and you had to figure out for yourself boss weapons and all that. In this game, it's more or less the same, but they still improved upon it a little bit. A side note, it has nothing to do with the overall points, but as a side note, as a heavy weapon user, I've been a heavy weapon user since Demon Souls. Heavy weapons in Dark Souls 1 are bottom of the barrel garbage to use, even in PvE, because in PvE you'll hit something, it'll get stunned, and the stun on your enemy will be done with before you even recover from your attack animation, so you're more than likely gonna get hit back. And that's a massive disadvantage, and I don't think they thought that one through. Another weird thing is that infinite stun locks can only be countered with what is technically a glitch, toggle escaping. And again, stun locking is a main focus of the combat for all Dark Souls games for some reason. I don't know why. It's how enemies can suddenly kill you, or how you can kill enemies and players in the blink of an eye. And also players can kill you back also with just infinite stun locks. If you don't like me saying the word stun lock over and over, then you may as well stop watching now, because I'm going to be mentioning it a lot. Like I said, for some reason they figured that stun locks were the appropriate thing for combat when it came to PvP in these games. I don't know why. I've touched upon this before in my Bloodborne videos. I don't agree with it. I certainly don't like it. I'm not a fan of it. But, you know, that's how they made it, so that's what we got. Another thing, dueling in Dark Souls 1 feels much better for me than in any other Souls game. I couldn't tell you why. Honestly, I can't tell you why. Maybe it's the slower combat, maybe it's the fact that both people are being careful because of instant backstabs, so they don't commit as much, and it's kind of a dance. It's really slow, I don't know. But I like it. It's also a thing to note that a quick weapon with a buff is going to be another theme in these games. So here we have footage of Dark Souls 2. So let's move on to Dark Souls 2. The poise mechanic is really inconsistent. Sometimes I'm going to tank a two-handed greatsword hit with a set of swords, but I can't tank a dagger from a player. It's really weird. The poise system in Dark Souls is convoluted. It's extremely unreliable and inconsistent. Now, that's a lot of buzzwords, but that's what it is. This game started the 2 guaranteed hit stun lock mechanic, and I hate it for it. The stun locks in this game used to be infinite, meaning that you would get stun lock until your opponent ran out of stamina. They patched it so that it's only specifically 2 hits for some reason. I don't know. The infusion system is awesome in this game. It doesn't do everything wrong. You do get true freedom in terms of gear, your weapon infusion, your armors, etc. The PvP is weirdly slow, and the physics are garbage and contribute to the jankiness. It's not slow like Dark Souls 1, it's just like weird and floaty. Because of this, the flow of combat is atrocious, and the animations are incredibly bad. The quality of the animations jumps from like Fromsoft made this one, but then they outsourced to someone else to make the rest of them. And this is pretty much the only footage of PvP that I got. The game was just not cooperating with me. I couldn't get decent fights. I couldn't get any invasions. The game was disconnecting constantly for some reason from the servers. So I don't have Dark Souls 2 footage. So let's just move on. Well, because I don't have that much footage, the bulk of this video is going to be Dark Souls 3 fights. And I'm not done with Dark Souls 2. Now, I'm going to explain that title that you just saw, that little transition. I'll explain it in a little bit, but just bear with me. So like I said, the flow of combat in Dark Souls 2 is atrocious. Dark Souls 2 feels like a Chinese knockoff of a Dark Souls game. It doesn't feel right, and I didn't get much footage, because I abandoned my co-op playthrough, and I quit trying to get any PvP in that game. I felt unmotivated to go on playing that game because everything, the important parts, the things that are important to me, they just don't feel right in that game. There's nothing I can say about Dark Souls 2 that hasn't been said already. But I assure you that my main complaints are mechanical rather than, anything else. So with that said, let's move on to the last one, the last hotness, the new baby, the last one that came out, the one everyone jumped into, Dark Souls 3. Now, what the hell was up with that title that I put before this? Well, it took me a long time to realize it. A very long time. But Dark Souls 3 PvP is essentially a more roll-heavy, non-floaty version of Dark Souls 2 PvP. Now, I'll get into that a little bit later. But right now, let's just go from the top once again. Let's talk about the same thing, poise system. In this game, how does it work? Well, the poise system is essentially hyper armor. That's all it is. It used to be that everyone got hyper mega armor even when they were naked. You couldn't break someone's hyper armor. So long as you were swinging a big weapon, you were gonna get really just infinite hyper armor, really. With the patch, they did fix it so that armor poise values were changed around a little bit and that the poise value actually mattered. So you couldn't just have, nothing on and swing a big weapon and get infinite hyper armor no matter what. So you would see these two dudes wailing on each other with great hammers, and whoever hit the other guy first, or whoever hit first rather, would be the one that could win the trade, because you could just keep swinging forever because your poise or your hyper armor was never going to get broken. Again, like I mentioned before, the quick weapon with a buff, that little theme that happened, because in Dark Souls 2 you could get like a dagger, you buffed it, and that was essentially a really fast ultra greatsword. That's how ridiculous the damage was in Dark Souls 2 PvP. Now the damages are normalized in Dark Souls 3. Everything is more or less going to do the same amount of damage every time. So that's a little different from Dark Souls 1, because in Dark Souls 1, you've seen it, I use a divine or occult greatsword, and I can hit people for 500 plus damage. That doesn't really happen in this game unless you're stacking buffs, which are less effective, I should say, in PvP for some reason. That's part of the reason why they normalized the damage. They pretty much nerfed weapon effects and buffs for PvP. So everyone is always more or less on the same playing field. But the quick weapon with a buff thing is still extremely effective in this game. In fact, it's double true for this game, more than ever. I strongly believe, and I've mentioned this before as well in another Bloodborne video, I strongly believe that the straight swords in this game were directly influenced by the saw cleaver weapon in Bloodborne, because they got a speed buff. Swing a straight sword in Dark Souls 1 or 2 and then compare it to 3, and you're going to see that they just put it on steroids. They also have that extended hitbox so that they hit further away. So when you're playing against a straight sword online, the latency plus the magical extended range that straight swords have, that's what's hitting you from so far. It's not necessarily that the player is playing on McDonald's Wi-Fi. So this game tries to be faster than the previous games. It pretty much goes back to Demon Souls, kind of. Not necessarily Bloodborne. I've heard a lot of people, since the game came out, say that this is basically Bloodborne. It is. It wants to be a little bit of Bloodborne, but really it's more Demon Souls than anything. Again, the thing is that it doesn't matter, because the guaranteed 2-hit stun locks, they deter anyone from doing anything. That's why the best thing to do in this game is to back off forever and just react to what your opponent is doing. And it makes for incredibly boring gameplay. That's why I said that this is basically Dark Souls 2. That's why I put that title before I transitioned into showing Dark Souls 3 footage. It's essentially just Dark Souls 2 all over again, except with a prettier coat of paint and not shitty physics. This game really feels good to control. It's the best controlling Dark Souls game. You don't feel like shit when you're moving around like you do in Dark Souls 2. And the poise system, these are so many things that are similar. even the poise system in Dark Souls 3 is essentially what they wanted to do in Dark Souls 2, except this time it works. You know, it's hyper armor, and the thing about Dark Souls 2 is that the hyper armor frames were really specific. So essentially, from what I could tell from years of playing the game, I did play Dark Souls 2 PvP for years. Well, I'm not for like a like a decade or anything, but you know, I played it for like a solid 2.5 years or something like that, non-stop almost. So I kind of know what I'm talking about. I don't have any raw data for you. I don't have any internet video game science. But it feels like in Dark Souls 2, the hyper armor, the frames for your hyper armor come out when your hitbox is active. So when you're attacking, the hitbox of your attack needs to be active in order for your hyper armor to work. Either that, or you need to stack an absurd amount of poise just to tank like a one-handed greatsword swing. It's really ridiculous. They really fucked up in that regard when it comes to like the poise system. There is essentially no poise system in Dark Souls 2 because it barely fucking works. So yeah, on that note, the infusion system in Dark Souls 3, everything was useless back in the day except for quality. They had to fix it like way later so that you had more choices. Now, the Dark Infusion, from what I last saw, the Dark Infusion was the last new hotness in Dark Souls 3, because it does a lot of damage and it chips through shields, and the damage is comparable to just having pure physical. Dark defenses are lower all around for most equipment, so you're gonna do good damage. But I found that you can get by with most of the other elementals. You know, you can do pretty well with magic, with lightning. Not so much with the raw elements like pure fire, just not chaos, just non-scaling fire, non-scaling dark, which is deep for some reason. What is the deep? Like, what is that? Excuse me for breaking the PvP talk, but what the fuck is the deep? Like, is it that? Why is it that there's two different flames and two different darks? Because there's profane flame, and then there's regular fire, and then there's the dark, but then there's also deep. So why are there like sub-elements for the main elements of the story? Why are there more questions than answers? Did they just throw shit on a chalkboard and they're like, okay, we're gonna have two of each now. We're gonna give them sub-elements and subplots for the plot that we don't already understand. Anyway, so generally speaking, the elemental damage is kind of a step back in this game compared to Dark Souls 1 specifically, like I mentioned before. In Dark Souls 1, elemental damage wasn't really that bad when compared to 3. And even back in the day, people were like, oh, elemental is bad in Dark Souls 1 because, you know, split damage and you have to go through two defenses. As you've seen already that I don't really have a problem killing people in Dark Souls 1 with a Divine Greatsword. I hit for a lot of damage, and there's no real problem with it, for the most part. It's only until you get someone that casts Great Magic Barrier, then they will pretty much deny every part of your magic damage. But that's because, you know, buffs like that actually work for PvP in Dark Souls 1. I wish they would have brought that back, but yeah, they nerfed everything, so whatever. Dark Souls 3 is extremely more limiting with your weapon selection if you want to keep up in the PvP. And I want to make a point of that. Only if you want to keep up. Because you can obviously you can invade with or fight with anything you want, but even when you're randomly invading, you often want to have a pocket meta weapon. Like you want to have like a straight sword or a pontiff curved sword, because that's the only curved sword that didn't get a speed nerf for some reason. You want to have something like that, or like a great sword for quick attacks. Excuse me. I'm trying to get comfortable here. for quick attacks with hyper armor. So if you're invading with a big weapon, you may not want to stick with it. You may want to actually switch to a greatsword because it swings quicker and it still gives you hyper armor. So in that regard, it's a little bit more limiting. The thing is that, and I never hear people talking about this. The reason invasions in Dark Souls 3 and 2, because remember, they're basically the same mechanically as far as PvP goes. The only difference is that in Dark Souls 3, they nerfed the damage values all around, but you still get hit twice. So the real reason why invasions are just god-awful in Dark Souls 3 is because of stun locks. There's no ifs and buts about it. It's not because of the other handicaps. You can get by with having less health. You can. There's ways around it. I mean, there's no way to fully invade with your full health bar, but there are ways that you can play if you play carefully. There's things that you can do to increase your health a little bit. And just overall, playing carefully, you can sort of mitigate that fact that you have less health. That's not the real reason why the invading is so hard in this game. And invasions should be hard. I'm not saying that it should be easy. But the reason that it adds an extra layer of garbage is because of the garbage stun lock system. Because you get hit twice guaranteed with most weapons. Except maybe for like a dagger or whatever. But let's say that you invaded a group of 3 people and they all have straight swords. That is a blender hell right there. So if a guy hits you twice and you roll away, his other butt buddy is going to swing at you, and he's more than likely going to hit you because remember, the straight swords in this game are super fast and they have a disjointed hitbox. So when you get hit again, when you're rolling away, you're going to get hit twice again. So you're going to get hit 4 times, which is going to be about 75% of your health, depending on how they're using the straight swords, if they have buffs on it or not. And remember, all this time, you can get hit again by another person or by the same 2 guys that are attacking you. So you're going to die. And you're not going to die because you played wrong, because getting hit is part of the game. You're going to get hit if you're outnumbered. That's kind of obvious. You're getting killed because of a stun lock system, because the stun locks, they gift you 2 hits. It's like, here, this is your reward. You get 2 hits in, guaranteed, for free. You know, courtesy of Miyazaki. Not really. From my understanding, the guy that was responsible for online mechanics and online stuff was still Yui Tanimura, who is the one that directed Dark Souls 2. So there's no surprise that this game is basically Dark Souls 2 PvP again, but slightly more refined. And again, it doesn't control like ass. So that's from my understanding. I think he is credited as being the main online interaction guy. So all the memes about Miyazaki this, Miyazaki that, he's the fucking CEO of Fromsoft. He probably doesn't sit down and say, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to gift players 2 guaranteed hits. It's going to be awesome for them. It's going to encourage them to fight. He doesn't do that. Yui Tanimura was probably like, oh yeah, let's just do what I did for Dark Souls 2 and just fuck it. And that's what they stuck with. So stun locks are a garbage mechanic. It's never fun to lose control of your character. And I'm not even getting into the half of it, because as you saw in the very first clip of this video, I got stun locked for 3 hits. So some weapons can stun lock you for more than 2 hits. Meaning that this garbage feature was completely intended, because at first you could give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, with Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1, you know, it's like, okay, it's your first try at this. You're still trying to figure out how to balance out the stun locks and the armor and whatever. But no, Dark Souls 3, you know, 2 more games later, or I should say 3 games after Demon Souls, stun locks are still a thing, and in fact they are a main core mechanic of the battles in Dark Souls 3. It is 100% intended that you get stun locked. 100%. Someone programmed it so that it's that way, and someone programmed certain weapons to be able to stun lock you for more than 2 hits. I don't really know why that's okay for them. Like, it's never fun in any video game. I'm talking about any video game, not just the PvP in these games. It's never fun to lose control of your character. In fact, some enemies in some games make it a point to be really annoying because they take mobility away from you. They take control away from you. It's not fun to fight some shitter with some weapon that can 4-hit stun lock you. And he just gets all that free damage, and all he had to do was press maybe 2 buttons. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's not funny. And it's honestly garbage design. And I think a lot of people give these games a pass because it's Dark Souls. You know, it's fucking perfect. No, not me. I have standards, you know, and it's depressing and it's infuriating because Dark Souls 3 came out after Bloodborne, meaning that for Bloodborne, someone sat down and they said, okay, this game is not going to have stun locks except for very, very highly specific combos that you're probably not going to land in PvP. But aside from that, this game is not going to have stun locks. This game is going to focus on single strong hits. And that's it. After you get hit once, you can dash away and try again. That's why it infuriates me. You may think I'm being fucking autistic about this, but there's no reason why you program it to be this way. Like, no, yeah, it's totally 4 hits. Yeah, cool. Totally perfect. Completely awesome. Like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a feature. That's really frustrating to me. The stun locks are a feature. And you may be thinking, well, you're just ranting and raving because you hate stun locks and, you know, not many people feel the same way you do. No, dude, you're not seeing the full picture. The stun lock mechanic slows the game down, nullifying the overall speed increase of everything else. Every weapon in this game is faster than in any other Dark Souls game, especially the big weapons. Heavy weapons, and again, this is a side note as a heavy weapon user. Heavy weapons are at their best, you know, at their best when it comes to Dark Souls. They're at their best in Dark Souls 3. And, you know, it's frustrating because it's like, oh, they're faster. So the ideal thing in my mind would have been like, okay, so they're just going to straight up rob Bloodborne and be like, okay, so this game is going to focus on strong single hits. That's why everyone is faster. Every weapon is faster because you can hit someone and then after that they're going to roll away or whatever, and maybe you're going to catch them in their roll, or maybe you can do something else to confuse them and hit them. And it could have created this different scenario in which, you know, people are a little bit more aggressive and they're not hiding behind a specific shield. And this is another thing I want to talk about. This is a really weird one. Shields in this game are bad except a few because, I don't know, all curved swords got nerfed except one because, I don't know. Elemental infusions are kind of meh when compared to Dark Souls 1. But Dark is very good because, I don't know, it's weirdly specific patterns. You know, certain things are better than others for no real reason, you know? They're better by design they're better, you know, compared to other stuff for who knows why. There's never any explicit reason. You could argue that Dark is good because, you know, overall there are less pieces of equipment that have high dark resistance. That could be argued. Sure, I can see that, but what about shields? Why is it only like 2 shields that are good? Medium shields, you know, Black Knight and Lothric Knight Shield. Why are those specifically the best ones? Why? Why can there be no other good medium shield? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, why is it so arbitrary? Why is it so weirdly specific? And don't give me that lore shit. Oh, because the Black Knights were super strong and the Lothric Knights are also super strong, so their shields are really good. Fuck off. You know that's not the reason. You fucking know that's not the reason. It's just weird, you know? I find it really weird. So anyway, you've been seeing a bunch of fights in Dark Souls 3. Honestly, team fights are what kept me going in this game. And it took a while for me to get into it because I did not get the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. Because I took a look at the equipment that you got. I took a look at like the overall length of the DLC and everything. And I started to read stuff. And I just figured, you know, it's not worth my money. You may think I'm being a snobby prick about it. But really, there's nothing that really interested me in that DLC. There are a couple of armors that I liked. The shield, the sacred oak shield, I think it's called. I do use it because a friend actually dropped it for me because it has like health regen. So, but other than that, I wasn't interested in the bosses or anything. There's like a naked dude with a wolf or something like that. It's like, are we really doing the Sif thing again? Really? Could we not, please? So instead of complaining about it, I just voted with my wallet. I said, okay, no, I'm not going to buy it. So it wasn't until the Ringed City that I actually got the arena. I got access to the arena. So it took a while for me to get into it. So I kind of missed out on the prime of team fights. But yeah, I mean, you know, ganking in this game is so good because stun locks, you know, stun locks. And, you know, no one ever mentions it. You know, all people are always ranting about, you know, the host can just resummon instantly. And that is a problem. I'm not saying it isn't. That's kind of bullshit. But the fact that him and his buddies barely need to work at all. They don't have to work at all to damage you. To massively damage you. To the point of, like, if you go towards them, and you get hit, you need to roll back like a billion times because probably 80% of your health is gone. Because all they had to do was start a blender. And it doesn't have to be straight swords. It could be anything because there's 3 of them, 1 of you. You know? And it's all because of the stun locks. Stun locks are the core mechanic of this game. And it slows everything the fuck down. So it's kind of a weird place that this game, PvP-wise, this game ended up in a weird place where it wants to be faster, but it ends up being slower anyway because of the stun locks, because of something that they also implemented on purpose. So that's a weird one right there. Don't get me wrong. Weapons in this game and you know, using whatever you want, it's super fun. But the meta weapons, they ruin that because it's always better to just shield along with a meta weapon. Excuse me, it's always better to shield with a specific shield because it has to be a specific one. It can't just be any shield. It's better to do that and back away forever than to actually play the game and fight someone. And, you know, people are going to say, like, well, you know, it's people playing carefully. You know, people are playing carefully. They want to land their hits. They're try-harding or whatever. And you know what? If you want to try hard, fine, that's fine. But it doesn't change the fact that the main core mechanics of the PvP, they literally oppose each other. Think about it. All weapons are faster. They're a little bit more viable. Actually, no. Weapons here are much more viable, all of them, than what they used to be in Dark Souls 1. Axes, and I'm not even talking about great axes, like axes in Dark Souls 3. They feel so fucking good compared to the fucking clunky mess that was Dark Souls 1. And Dark Souls 1 is a clunky game, and that's fine. Because that's a game of its time, you know. That's what they did. They slowed everything down, and they slowed everything the fuck down. Except katanas for some weird reason. Again, we go back to the thing where specific things are fast for some reason. But again, we could dismiss it because, oh, we forgot to make katanas slow or whatever. Strangely enough, katanas in Dark Souls 3, I don't know if it's because of the overall speed increase and everything, but they seem like really slow. Slower than they have ever been for some reason. It could just be me, So yeah, guys, that's those are my observations of the PvP as it has evolved or devolved in these games. I'm sorry if I stumbled my words a bunch. I don't have a script. Like right now, I'm off the script. Again, it wasn't a script. It's notes. I have notes. And there's probably things that I didn't mention that I probably should have. But I haven't put out a video or anything other than this one because I have been keeping track of like stuff like E3 and all that. That happened. Sekiro, Shadows Die fucking twice. Holy shit. In the end, it did have the Shadows Die Twice subtitle. But the game is not called Shadows Die Twice, so everyone on YouTube that called it that can fuck off. It's called Sekiro. And Sekiro is much shorter to say, much better than Shadows Die Twice. So everyone else can still fuck off. I was right. The game is not called Shadows Die Twice. It's a subtitle. It's not a fuck off. Leave me alone. No, but really, I'm gonna try to make another video sort of covering the whole thing about that game has a lot of people shaken up, the fact that it's not gonna have any PvP, why I'm okay with it, and why I think that it's a step in the right direction for From Software. But not in this video. This video is about the PvP. Looking back on it, I think that Dark Souls 3, like it became yin and yang, For every good thing that it has other things that cancel out each other. So like I mentioned, the speed boost and the fact that everything is faster, but you still get stun locked. So in the end, it doesn't matter how fast your weapon is. I'm running around in circles because I'm trying to make fun of the guy because he was doing that. So it cancels each other out, and I think that overall the PvP in these games was just never meant to be taken seriously. It doesn't stop me from just doing a little retrospective on it. Overall, the PvP is always fun at some point, but I do end up quitting at some point, and I just go back to Bloodborne, which is what I'll be doing eventually. I mean, the same thing happens with Dark Souls 1 Remaster. I'm kind of losing the fire for that game, and I'll just go back to Bloodborne. I'll make more videos on it, though. But anyway, guys, this is already long enough. I hope that you enjoyed this video and my rambly commentary, observation, whatever. And hopefully you found it entertaining in some way. And hopefully you learned something too. Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, this is the last fight. Thank you for joining me. I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.